Today on Ask Phyllis, we are answering Michaela's question. There's Michaela. But she asked, actually, sorry Michaela, it was a number of months ago that you asked this question, and it was about what was life like in Washington during the war, and did you meet any famous people, and what was your job like? So, here you go.
Life in Washington during the war was like life anywhere. You get up in the morning and go to work and have some social life, and the fact that there was a war on didn't make very much difference, except that there were a lot of Army people around. As far as my job was concerned, I had a very good job. I was a secretary to the commanding officer in a group called, now I'm trying to remember the name of our group, no, I can't think of the word. Anyway, it was just all about what's going on in the war. And we were there because President Roosevelt promised his people that he wouldn't send any soldiers overseas, but he knew that England needed a lot of help, and so he established what was called the Lend-Lease Agreement, and that meant that the United States provided England with whatever they needed by the way of ammunition and also munitions to conduct the war, and in return they got, I think it was a 99-year lease on some property in Newfoundland. I don't know what they did with that, but that was the deal. And so, of course, the British had to send some people over there to tell the Americans what they wanted. And that was what my job was, working for one of the officers who had to go around and meet with the American officers. And he didn't very often go out into American bases, but occasionally. And that was what we did. We just kept sending reports back to England about what was needed. And of course, we also looked after visitors. And that was one of the more interesting parts of my job, because when officers came over from England, and the Americans wanted people to come with recent battle experience, and so they changed them quite frequently. And when officers would come over, and usually just stay for a few months, and of course when they went back home they had to take presents to their wives and children. And I was the one who went out and bought the things that they were to take back with them. And that was one of the most pleasant parts of my job. There was one very nice little shop right near where our office was, and of course you couldn't buy nylons during the war, or silk stockings. I don't think nylons were even in general supply at that time, but silk stockings were. And one day we were in this shop, and the young officer wanted me to buy some stockings for his wife back home. And so I said, well, I'm sure that's going to be a problem. And I went to the clerk and I said, I wanted to look at some silk stockings. And she said, well, we don't have any silk stockings. And so I turned to the man and said, well, that's what I thought. And she said, oh, are you with that gentleman? And I said, yes. And she said, well, I could sell him some silk stockings. So he got the stockings for his wife, and then he says, do you really not have any stockings? And I said, no, we haven't been able to get them for quite a while. So he bought some for me. And when he got back to the office and was telling his friends there what he had done, and I overheard one of them saying, are you crazy? Do you know how much you paid for those stockings you bought for her? But that was kind of fun.
Very good.
Famous people?
Did you ever meet somebody famous?
Not really.
Did you almost meet somebody famous?
Almost. I was walking down the street one day and I met I think it was a movie star who was now in the American Army and who was quite well known, and I can't remember his name. And I didn't meet him. I just happened to walk down the street one way when he was walking the other way. I suppose in a sense I did meet him.